Can Hezbollah be disarmed? Its leaders have ardently refused, but Lebanon's government is formulating a plan to persuade them. Less powerful than it used to be, the group still wields control over much of the south. So will Israeli and U.S.-backed efforts to disarm them pacify Hezbollah or spark a return to war? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Lebanon. Well, peace in Lebanon has always been fragile. Years of sectarian-based civil war led to the formation of a power-sharing government which brought an end to the conflict but left an uneasy balance of power between various militia and their ideologies. Well, today that delicate balance has been thrown deeper into disarray with Israel's war on Gaza seeping further into Lebanon's south. Now, some Lebanese will say Hezbollah is their only protection, not just against Israeli aggression, but from parliamentarians in Beirut who don't necessarily care about protecting the Shia population. But many others deny that and say it's an armed Hezbollah that refuses diplomacy and keeps the country at war, more in the interest of Iran than of Lebanon. Here's a look.
The future of Hezbollah and Lebanon itself hangs in the balance. The government is set to present a plan on Sunday aiming to disarm the powerful paramilitary group by the end of this year. The move follows a US proposal to bring all weapons under the control of Lebanon's state army. US envoy Thomas Barrack, speaking to reporters in Beirut, emphasized that the plan does not necessarily involve military action against Hezbollah.
Right, they're not talking about going to war. They're talking about how do we convince Hezbollah to give up those arms.
But Hezbollah firmly rejects that. Last week, its leader issued a stark warning saying there would be no life left in Lebanon if a confrontation breaks out.
This government's decision was taken under American and Israeli dictates. If this government continues in its current form, it cannot be trusted to safeguard Lebanon's sovereignty unless it reacts its decision.
Qasem also said that Hezbollah can discuss disarmament, but only after Israel fully withdraws from Lebanon. Under the ceasefire deal signed last November, Israeli forces were supposed to pull back south of the demarcation line called the Blue Line, while Hezbollah fighters would retreat to the north of the Litani River. But Israeli troops remain present, and attacks continue nearly every day. Now, Israel says it will gradually withdraw from southern Lebanon if Hezbollah disarms.
What Israel has now said, which is historic, is we don't want to occupy Lebanon. We're happy to withdraw from Lebanon. And we will meet those withdrawal expectations with our plan as soon as we see what is the plan to actually disarm Hezbollah.
Hezbollah was severely weakened by last year's war with Israel, which destroyed much of its arsenal and killed its leader, Hassan Nasrallah. Its key ally, Iran, also took a major hit from US and Israeli strikes during the conflict in June. Initially, Tehran opposed Lebanon's disarmament plan, but during a visit to Beirut 2 weeks ago, Iran's security chief took a softer stance, saying Tehran is not interfering in Lebanon's internal affairs.
Any decision that the Lebanese government makes in consultation with the resistance is respected by us. Your enemy is Israel, which attacked you, and your friend is the one who resisted Israel. Appreciate it.
The US is also pitching a reconstruction plan for Lebanon's war-torn south. Barak revealed that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are expected to help create an economic zone, providing livelihoods for tens of thousands of Hezbollah fighters after laying down arms. In Lebanon's long history of sectarian violence, Hezbollah emerged as the protector of the Shia community. Over the years, it grew stronger than the Lebanese army itself, taking on the role of the nation's defender. Removing Hezbollah from the picture is a monumental change, one that could shake the very foundations of Lebanon.
So can a paramilitary group that was once stronger than the Lebanese army itself be safely disarmed, and would that ultimately bring peace and stability to Lebanon? Well, joining me now to debate that and much more are from Boston, public policy fellow at American University of Beirut, non-resident senior fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, Rami Khouri. From Beirut, former member of the Lebanese Parliament for the Future Movement, Basem Shabb. And from the Lebanese capital, Middle East bureau chief for the Los Angeles Times, Nabi Boulos. Thanks all so much for being with me. So on August 31st, this disarmament plan is set to be revealed. Nabi, what are you expecting from the government? What are they going to pitch exactly? And is there any way it would be seen by by Hezbollah and its supporters?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the details have been lacking, I must say, so far, and the army has been tasked with producing this plan in a fairly short time frame, I would say. And at the same time, we're told that force will not be a part of it. Now, I should say there has been some success in disarming Hezbollah in the south, but that's happening because, well, I should say south of the Litani. I should say that's happening because Hezbollah is cooperating. We have seen sites that have been disarmed, and we've also seen demining groups go in and sanitize areas where there had been, bomb sites, right? So like when an Israeli armament struck a weapons depot of some sort, right, then obviously you have all this unexploded ordnance and things like that. And we've seen groups go in and clean those areas, and Hezbollah has been cooperative. Now, I mean, does that mean that it's going to allow a disarmament across the entire country? That's a whole other bag of tricks, I must say. And I mean, the fact is that it really is unclear how the plan is to achieve that.
Yeah.
I should say what the plan is to achieve that, pardon me.
Yeah, Rami, would you agree there? And also there's the issue that right now the United States is making guarantees basically on behalf of Israel, saying that Israel will take steps in kind after Hezbollah does its first steps. But, I mean, would you trust Israel to obey the United States in the first place and take those reciprocal steps?
Well, most of the people in Lebanon and the Middle East don't really trust either the United States or Israel to comply with its commitments. And we've seen it after the ceasefire in Lebanon last year. The U.S. and France were supposed to monitor the ceasefire. The Israelis kept occupying 5 areas in Lebanon, did 1,000 or more attacks, assassinated people, and the monitors have done nothing. So this is not really only that the people in Lebanon, and I think most of the region, feel it's not realistic or fair to just say, will Hezbollah be disarmed? Hezbollah was armed because of the threats against Lebanon, mostly from Israel, but also from other places. And the issue of taking away Hezbollah's arms and letting the Lebanese armed forces be the only group in Lebanon that has arms is a point that most people in Lebanon, including Hezbollah, would go along with eventually, but only when the Lebanese government and armed forces are capable of defending all of Lebanon from external and internal threats. So Hezbollah is armed and is still a powerful actor. We don't know how powerful, as Nabi said, but focusing on them primarily is an incomplete analysis of the picture. And the Israelis say they'll withdraw from parts of the south once Lebanon disarms Hezbollah. Well, the presence of Israel is not the only problem in Lebanon. It's Israel's constant attacks, surveillance, assassinations, etc. So there has to be a more complete understanding of why the conflict is going on, how it started, and how to end it.
Okay. Basem, what do you make of this? Because, I mean, as Rami was saying, the focus is strictly on Hezbollah. But we're looking at an Israel and the United States both saying that not even UNIFIL troops not even their mandate should be renewed. So Hezbollah should have to disarm, and a basic UN kind of neutral peacekeeping force should also be pulled out. Are the demands too heavy on the Israeli side?
It doesn't look like the Israelis have been very flexible or willing to do anything unless Lebanon disarms Hezbollah completely, something which is going to be very difficult. But having said that, the arms of Hezbollah have played many roles in the past, and now, unfortunately, with the developing situation, with the pressure from the United States and the position of the Lebanese government, the weapons of Hezbollah have taken a sectarian tone. There is a conflict with Israel. There is a conflict between Lebanon and Israel that's ongoing. But in the background, there are shadows of sectarian fears and existential fears after what happened in Sueda and in the west parts of Syria. And so Hezbollah says we will not disarm because Israel is still an aggressor and occupies 5 points in South Lebanon. But there is also this that if we disarm, look what happened to the Palestinians in the camps in Sabra and Shatila. Look what happened to the Druze, and there are other issues. So the disarming Hezbollah is not a dimension that only involves Lebanon and Israel. And besides, Iran has a say. Even if Hezbollah was inclined to make some concessions, the final decision, many people say, is not in Beirut, but in Iran. And so the pressure that is put on the Lebanese government to disarm Hezbollah finally is not going to bear fruit as long as Iran is not cooperating. And many people think that Iran is playing the Lebanese card so it can get benefits elsewhere. So it's a complicated picture, and I don't think we're going to see anything of a complete disarmament anytime soon.
Yeah, it's incredibly complicated and quite unpredictable, really. Now, I want to talk more about Iran's role here, but Nabi, first I have to ask you this, and what you make of Hezbollah's immediate response, saying, of course, this is a U.S. and Israeli initiative, not a Lebanese initiative, and then threatening war, basically, if it's forced through. Do you think that kind of response rallies support from the Lebanese people or repels it?
Well, for the Lebanese people, I mean, we've seen clearly not, right? No one actually wants to have another civil war, right? The specter of civil war has long been, I mean, let's say a calming thought, right? Lebanese politics, which is to say that people don't want to go through that again. And so therefore, it has been used in some ways as a cudgel to stop people from perhaps more aggressively seeking out their rights. But in this particular case, the problem is that we are talking about a situation where Hezbollah can use its weapons against Lebanese people. I mean, regardless of its abilities in terms of fighting an adversary like Israel, it still has enough arms to be able to mount a serious challenge within Lebanon, right? And certainly it's perhaps the best organized military force in the country, right? And remains to be so, even compared to the Lebanese army. So these are questions that are not just idle, I suppose, in terms of, how Hezbollah will react. Now, at the same time, right, there is, I think, a feeling among a lot of people in Hezbollah that perhaps weapons need to be, the way of this equation of deterrence, معادلة الردع, that used to be called or that used to be mentioned in the South, right? That clearly has fallen, right? That clearly has changed right now, where the weapons of Hezbollah prove to be not so effective a deterrent against Israel. So, I think even within the party itself, right, there are serious questions as to the point of arms or how arms should be used. But with that being said, right, like, will they just give it up at a moment when, there are all these points that are occupied, when Israel continues to conduct near daily attacks in the south, when, now you have a de facto 5-kilometer strip along the border, which is basically, really, it's a no man's land at this point because Israel prevents the rebuilding of anything there, right? Is all that going to be just merely accepted by Hezbollah? That's a question that really, I think, will be problematic.
Yeah, Tom Barak actually said that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are the ones that are going to create these economic zones to provide livelihoods for tens of thousands of Shia Lebanese in the south. Let me turn to Rami. Do Lebanese people trust that investment would even come?
There have been many cases where Saudis and Qataris have provided huge amounts of money for Lebanon, for the entire country, especially rebuilding after various wars. So I think people anticipate that the Saudis and Qataris and others would help for sure, because they have an interest in a stable region as well. But they have a bigger interest in a just region, an equitable resolution of these conflicts, not one imposed by either Israeli military fight or American and European colonial pressures. So this is the big challenge. How do you balance the legitimate needs of Lebanon and the legitimate security needs of Israel?
Yeah.
They will never be balanced by, military might, nor by what we're seeing now, economic bribes. And, if you do this, we'll give you lots of money and you can set up underwear factories or whatever, as they did in other Arab countries. So this is something that really, in my mind, reflects a bigger colonial legacy in the region, that people in the West and Israel, the two colonial powers, the U.S. and Israel, are still acting as colonial powers, dictating terms to the Arabs, weaker Arabs. All of the Arabs in the region are weaker than Israel.
But
and this is not going to work.
Yeah. As you say, those terms are being dictated. We know Basem just said very clearly that actually the decision to disarm Hezbollah lies in Tehran. Tehran, though, says it is not interfering. Rami, which is it?
We've been discussing this question since I first worked in Beirut in the 1970s, well, 80s, after Hezbollah was created and Iran played a role. And this question of Iran and Hezbollah's exact relationship, who gives the orders, and has never been fully resolved. I don't think that Hezbollah is simply a client of Iran that does whatever Iran wants it to do. But it relies heavily on Iran, always has. But Hezbollah, in the end, operates because it has legitimacy among many, but not all Lebanese. It is like Hamas in Palestine. And these groups came about because of injustices inside their country. In Lebanon, the Israelis have been attacking since the 1970s, bombing the airport and bombing bridges, etc. So unless people take a wider, comprehensive view of the real issues here and try to resolve them by addressing the legitimate needs of both sides, there will never be a stable peace.
Okay. Basem, for those who do believe Hezbollah provides protection for what some consider a marginalized population in the south, could the state and the Lebanese armed forces be trusted then with replacing that protection, especially if Israeli aggression is focused most on the Shia population itself?
And the legacy of Hezbollah also involves involvement in Syria, not to say more of that. It was a gross mistake for Hezbollah to be involved in Syria. To talk about injustices, I think Hezbollah's involvement in Syria would surely be under that category. A great injustice for the Syrian people, and I must be very honest in saying that. Now, what will protect the minorities in Lebanon? Is it going to be the militia-style weapons, or is it going to be the state and generalized agreements? But to believe for any sect in Lebanon to believe that its weapons can protect it now is a fallacy, especially Hezbollah. Hezbollah has no backing. They've lost Syria. They've lost any corridor of support from Iran. They've lost all their political allies in Lebanon, the Sunnis, the Druze, the Christians. Even the Christians' allies have abandoned them. And there is this sense of existential threat. And the only solution for that is not for Hezbollah to keep its weapons, but to rely on the state of Lebanon, which has now, for a change, good relations, or possibly good relations, with Syria. And that is the best guarantee. Now, good relations with the United States do have an effect on Israel. Were it not for the United States, we would not have had an agreement in the sea. We would not have had a ceasefire. So for us to behave like we're in an everlasting crusade in which the weapons of Hezbollah are indispensable is really not very accurate.
Okay. I see you both nodding your head in agreement there. So I guess that brings...
Well, I mean...
Go ahead, Nabi.
I mean, I would just say that, yes, of course, it's true that these weapons have proven to be ineffective in terms of fighting the air power of Israel. But it is worth noting that in terms of the actual ground offensive, Hezbollah did manage to stop a major ground offensive by the Israelis, right? And the fact is that if we look at the damage that occurred, especially in the south, right, we'll see that about 80% of the damage came after the ceasefire. I mean, I think the issue is, of course, Basem is correct in terms of the idea that people should be relying on international law and agreements, and again, good relations with Syria and the U.S., right, rather than relying on what is essentially a militia's arsenal. But at the same time, it's hard to, I guess, reconcile that notion with what's been happening recently, which is to say that Israel has not fulfilled its part of the agreements, right, when it comes to the November ceasefire. And the fact is also, look at what's been happening elsewhere. It's hard to argue with people when you can point to so many examples where Israel has not respected the ceasefire or not respected the peace. Again, in the West Bank, in Shatila, etc. Right? These instances give you pause.
Yeah. I mean, the logic of rules doesn't really apply in predicting how this should unfold. So I'd like to get everyone's opinion on kind of a final question here, because right now, the people that are in charge of negotiating whatever peace might be possible are U.S. envoys that are taking the stage now. Nabi, I'll start with you. Megan Ortegas, Tom Barrack. Are these the best people to really be leading the charge here? Do you feel confident that they're the ones that are best informed of the true complexities that Rami especially was describing? Are these the right people to understand why Hezbollah exists in the first place?
Well, the fact of the matter is that I would argue that most U.S. envoys have not been able to provide that. And the fact is, even when we have had actually U.S. envoys that have, let's say, perhaps been more sympathetic to the Arab way of thinking, like Philip Habib back in the day, etc., it hasn't mattered. And the fact is, it doesn't matter, right? There is an essential policy that is being followed by the U.S., and the special envoy can only work within the margins or within the larger framework, right, of that policy, but they can't really do much more. And it's clear that in terms of policy, right, at this point, the Trump administration, I guess, has common cause with Israel. We've seen this from Mike Huckabee, the ambassador in Israel. We've seen this from Barak in many ways as well, right? We can talk again about this notion of the U.S. as an honest broker, but the reality just shows at this point that this is not the case.
No. Rami?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I also agree with what Basem said, that this is not an issue that's going to be resolved militarily. And the situation that prevailed from the 1980s until a year and a half ago is no longer the prevailing situation. The Hezbollah cannot keep acting like it used to act. Other groups in Lebanon have to change their attitude. Syria's change is huge. So there has to be a new method of resolving these issues that focuses more on the legitimate needs of all parties. This still hasn't happened yet. The Americans, with their mediation now, are basically saying, if Hezbollah and the Lebanese army do this, then the Israelis will pull back a little bit. But that doesn't resolve the fundamental issue of having Israel threatening and attacking Lebanon for 40, 50 years. Until people get to the root causes of these conflicts and resolve them, you're never going to get an equitable resolution. And the Americans and the Israelis now are using their force, their political and economic and military force to impose a resolution, and that's probably not going to work either.
Okay. Basem, go ahead.
Well, the weapons of Hezbollah are, I think, mainly a domestic issue. In all fairness, it has to be a domestic issue. Now, the American interest in Lebanon, Senator Lindsey Graham was very open, said, we're interested in Lebanon because it protects diversity and because it's the only country where Christians have some sort of presence and they're protected. So the American interest in Lebanon has this cultural dimension, Lebanese in America, diaspora, diversity. But how can this be translated into something more than that? It seems that America's interests in the area may not be, the interest may not last very long. And I think we may be in a period like the end of the 80s, where the America, after really beefing up the Lebanese army and showing up in force, decided, you know, this is a lost cause, let it slip for another so many years, and then we'll follow up on that later. I'm afraid that this visit, this last visit, was basically not a good visit. It was very high power. It caused a lot of infractions in the Lebanese, especially with the Shia. What if America shifts to Syria and Lebanon becomes forgotten?
Very quickly, Basem, do you fear that there could be a return to the 1980s civil war dynamics in Lebanon?
I don't think so, because the substrate is not there. Syria is not part of the Soviet Union. Nobody's willing to finance this thing. And realistically, Hezbollah's weapons are only in the Shia areas. The Christian, Sunni, Druze areas have no Hezbollah weapons. And Hezbollah now doesn't have the mobility to move weapons around. So even the status quo would be acceptable to a lot of parties.
Basem, that will have to be the final word. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd really like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us, our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media. Do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.